Hello, I'm Jeff Brown for Knowledge at Wharton. Today we're with Kent Smetters, Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy at Wharton, and we're going to talk about 2013 and how things stand at the beginning and how we think they're going to go through the year. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So the first thing I think is just a general question, what is the state of the economy? It certainly seems to be a little bit better, but no one's really bragging about it. Is it going to get better or sputter along, get worse? What do you think?
I think it's going to sputter along, and I think we're in this for a while. I think a lot of the projections that people have about a turnaround 2013, 2014 are probably optimistic. So historically, since 1980, fixed private investment has hovered around 16, 17, 18% of GDP, and that's gone way down. It went down to about 10, 11% during the Great Recession, and it's slowly climbing its way up, but it really has not come back to where we need it. And the job market is still really bad. I mean, the job creation is barely keeping up with the growth rate of population. At this rate, we won't be back to the natural rate of unemployment for another 5 years at least. And in fact, most of the changes that we've seen in the unemployment rate recently has actually been just because people dropping out looking for jobs rather than kind of real jobs being created. And so, fundamentally in this country, and this is the big issue that a lot of people aren't talking about, is we really have an education problem. If you look at the unemployment rate for college graduates, it never got that high even during this Great Recession. It's been a lot of people who do not have a college degree. That's still in the double digits. Blacks and minorities still in the double digits. And so that's the big problem is that the world's changing. There's big returns to education. A lot of people don't have it, and that's what we really need to be focusing on.
For those who don't have it, I hate to be pessimistic, but is there any real hope other than going back to school? But what if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s and you don't have much education?
Yeah, the truth is that there really is not a lot of hope unless they obtain new skills. And so I think the approach for education is multifaceted. We need to have much better public schools. Public schools should be focused on educating kids and not as employment opportunities. It should be more power to kids and less power to the teacher unions. Of course, there's more issues involved in just that. We're spending a lot per capita on kids in this country in terms of education. We're one of the highest in the world, but we're getting very little return for it. And so we need to get public schools fixed. But we also need to get training better for people in their 30s so they can acquire new skills. But bottom line is a college degree is still the big differentiator in the labor market today.
While we're on public schools for just a second, one of the obvious problems is kids dropping out. They're clearly not getting an education. But for those who remain, do you think that the schools are focusing on the right skills, the right subjects?
No, I don't think so. I think there has to still be more reward for getting people to understand a lot of the basic fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic. I mean, there's still we have a shortage still of engineers, of even computer science people in this country, and we still have kids who are graduating who really can't comprehend reading and can't write, and these are huge advantages in the labor market.
When you look at the economy, aside from the things we've mentioned, what do you see are sort of the key issues that are kind of overhanging right now that will either push it ahead or could send us back into a bigger slowdown?
Yeah, and I think the education reform is kind of a long-term investment. Other long-term investments that we got to be making right now is entitlement reform. And I think there's kind of this belief, this myth out there that we don't have to take any kind of big hits right now until we get the economy back. So let's just get the economy back to full employment, and then we'll take our medicine. And that's the big problem that we face right now, because that's just a myth. In particular, we'll never get people to make large investments in this economy when they face tremendous uncertainty if they're going to get taxed to death kind of later on. And we really have to resolve the long-term financing problem of the government to encourage people to make kind of the big bets. We've already seen this in the area of biology right now. Investment in that area has gone way down. Lots less investment in pharma, large molecule, small molecule therapies, and so forth over time because they're long-term bets, and no one knows what that world's going to look like 10 years from now. And given the low probability of success, people are starting to shift toward less risky things. And that's a big problem. The government needs to create much more clarity for investors and people making big sacrifices what that world's going to look like a decade from now. And we're just not doing that.
A lot of the discussion of entitlements, of course, looks at Medicare as the real big one. That's a major problem. And you hear remedies proposed like, well, raising the eligibility age a year or two, or clamping down on the payments to doctors and hospitals. Are those really enough, or there have to be something much more sweeping than that to make this work?
It has to be fundamental reform. Those are not going to do much. Increasing the entitlement age or retirement age is not going to do much. Reducing reimbursements to doctors just means fewer doctors are going to take Medicare. And so what really has to change is we need to go in a fundamental reform away from the fee-for-service model that we have now, more toward per capitation or having people understand the marginal costs of the medicine that they are getting. And so various plans out there, bipartisan plans like the Ryan-Rivlin plan and the other plans that have tried to move the conversation in that direction, right now have been kind of demagogued by all sides. But that's the conversation that we need to have. If we fix everything else and don't touch Medicare, we're doomed. and if we screw up a lot of things, but fix Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, we're in pretty good shape. And so it really comes down to those.
And Social Security, my impression is that's a problem, but not as big a problem as Medicare. Is that correct?
It is. It's a much smaller problem, both in size and in the nature of the problem. In size, it's probably 1/6 of the problem of Medicare. And in terms of the nature of the problem, at least with Social Security benefits, it's a dollar benefit. So you can decide who to give fewer dollars to. And lots of plans out there about keeping the poor out of poverty, but maybe reducing some of the benefits that go to higher income classes and so forth. And with Medicare, much harder problem, because what do? You say, we're not going to pay for half of this open heart surgery, and you pay for the other half. Much harder problem to fix.
Yeah, and I gather that raising the eligibility age or the starting age for Medicare doesn't mean much, because those are the healthier people in their 60s.
Right.
It's the people in their 80s who are really costing a fortune.
That's right. Almost all the Medicare spending, I shouldn't say all, but the vast majority of it, is done in the last 2-3 years of life. And so increasing the eligibility age has very little impact.
Now, looming over all this, of course, is the question of the debt and
Right.
deficit and the debt ceiling and all that. How important is it that we get some sort of kind of long-term solution to these problems?
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, no one's going to make an investment. Private entrepreneurs are not going to make the sacrifice until they know what the long run looks like. And the signal so far from Washington has been entrepreneurs and people who've invested and succeeded. They're going to be the ones who we go to for getting the money to solve these problems. And so until you create that type of certainty about what the future politics is going to look like by having us on a long-run sustainable path today, we're not going to make any real headway. I mean, what I think the biggest myth that really just needs to be dealt with is this idea that we can just balance all these problems on kind of the backs of the rich. And that's been the group we've gone to in the past, and that we can just pile it some more on. Right now, we're carrying a national deficit of $9,000 per every U.S. household. If the Bush tax cuts had expired, so the taxes went up for everybody, taxes would have only gone up about $2,000 per household. And that's what everybody was calling the fiscal cliff. and of course, that couldn't possibly happen. And so it's this big view in Washington, really on both sides, that the middle class should not be hit, whether it's higher taxes or lower benefits, and that they should be participating in this whole debate, where it's just mathematically impossible to do something meaningful without them participating, either in the form of higher taxes, a broader base, lower benefits. And the most recent tax increase on the rich will close about 6 to 7% of the annual deficit this year. Trivial amounts. And so we need to have a broad-based discussion.
Is there any way to deal with these problems without a lot of pain for the middle class and for others? Are there any technological breakthroughs or any sort of dream solutions that we haven't thought of or that may come along?
No. I mean, we're just way over-consuming right now. We've gotten a very rich appetite, and it's going to be painful for people to think about, I have to cut back. But right now, as a nation, we're spending much more than what we can. And as a result, we're not saving for the future. And we're on a path that is just completely unsustainable. The middle class has to be part of the solution.
I think most people would, if you ask them what they want out of the economy, they want an improved standard of living, better prospects for jobs, and a comfortable retirement. And it sort of boils down to those. What are the prospects for getting all of those in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, they're not good, at least on our current path, simply because we've already consumed a lot of that. We've saved very little for the future. The average U.S. household has saved very little. Our government has overspent, and we're simply not going to grow fast enough in order to allow us to kind of grow our way out of this problem. Keep in mind, certain benefits like Social Security and Medicare already keep up with lots of the technological progress. They keep up with the average wage rate. And so it's not something that we can easily grow our way out of. And so real fundamental choices are going to have to be made. And this is why it's, I think, real important that we make real hard decisions about saving more today, and why the tone of Washington has to completely change. Right now, the president is essentially taking advantage, I think, of the weakened position that Congress has, especially in the public limelight, whereas the president really needs to shift focus and say, this is a national problem. This is a bipartisan problem. We're here because of both political parties. And here we need to have a fundamental reform to our tax code, our entitlement problems, but this is going to involve everybody's participation. This idea that we can just finance this off the backs of a few is just mathematically impossible.
Well, it's grim, but I guess we knew we had to hear it. So we'll hope things turn out better, but thank you very much. We'll talk about it again.
My pleasure.